A young man shielded his eyes and stared into the sun-dappled trees. When he could see again, his jaw fell open. Before him stood an immense shape uncoiling itself from around an ancient tree. Glowing black scales shone like polished obsidian. Fangs like daggers glistened from a mouth stretched wide enough to swallow a man, and two burning golden eyes fixed on him with cold, ancient hunger. A shiver ran down the young man's spine. This was no ordinary beast. It was the ntej serpent, the devourer of worlds. He recognized it from the legends, the nightmare that had plagued his village for generations. Behind him, the villagers cowered in terror. They had come to this sacred clearing seeking sanctuary from the serpent only to find their worst fears made flesh. But the young man did not run. He was the grandson of Chongneng, the hero who had banished the serpent all those years ago, and he would carry on his grandfather's legacy. He stepped forward and raised his gong. Then, summoning every ounce of strength, he struck it with the mallet boom. The sound reverberated through the clearing, shaking the very earth beneath their feet. As if awakened by some primal instinct, the men rallied. Their spears trembled in their hands, their bows were pulled taut, their arrows nocked and aimed. But as the serpent raised its head and let loose a deafening hiss, they dropped their weapons, paralyzed by fear. This is no beast, one whispered, his voice cracking. It is death itself. The serpent coiled and uncoiled, a silent promise of what was to come. If it chose to strike, the village would be wiped away like dust in the wind. But the boy did not waver. He struck his gong again, this time faster, more urgent with each resonant boom. The energy in the clearing grew, coalescing into the shape of a great ox, its horns like polished steel, its hide the color of burned umber. At the same time, something else stirred in the sky. Wings beat the air, and a great eagle cried out, spreading feathers of fire as it circled above. The serpent below reared back, baring its fangs, and in a voice that boomed like distant thunder, it spoke. So the prophecy is true. You are here, little boy, but why? You have no hope of defeating me. Your grandfather bound the shadow, but I am older and stronger. You will die, and your people will belong to me. The boy gritted his teeth and pounded his gong again and again, faster and faster, until the wax ox grew huge and powerful and the wax eagle soared high above, a blazing beacon in the darkening sky. Then the serpent struck. Its massive body crashed into the ground, sending shockwaves through the clearing. The ox charged to meet it. Horns lowered. For a moment, scales met steel. Sparks flew. Then the serpent, gathering all its strength, struck again. The ox reeled back, bellowing in pain. The eagle swooped down, talons extended, and raked across the serpent's face. For a moment, the creature recoiled, blinded and screeching, but then it lashed out with its tail. Crack of thunder. The eagle cried out and began to fall, its flames flickering and dying. Rise, the boy shouted, his voice trembling but unbroken. Do not fall. And as if invigorated by his words, the eagle flared back to life, wings blazing brighter than before. The serpent reared back, spitting venom. The men screamed as the poison burned through trees like fire. The ox caught the venom on its horns, but the ground around them smoked and hissed. The boy stumbled, his knees threatening to buckle. He knew his wax spirits could not hold forever. His grandfather's voice echoed in his heart. Remember, grandson, strength alone is not enough. You must use wisdom. The serpent laughed, a terrible sound that shook the men to their knees. What wisdom can you offer, child? You are surrounded. There is nowhere left to run. The boy glanced frantically around. Where was he? Where was the wisdom he needed? He didn't know, and panic threatened to overwhelm him. But then he saw it, the ancient boulder where the serpent had been coiled, half hidden by vines and moss. He had seen this rock monolith many times as a boy, nothing special about it, except that it was always here in the center of the clearing. He knew this rock well, but what his grandfather had known, he had never understood. As the serpent prepared to strike again, winding and coiling for the kill, the boy rushed toward the monolith. In that instant, he understood. This was not just a rock, it was an altar of power, a conduit of magic, the serpent's source. If he could destroy the altar, then the serpent would be vulnerable. He raced toward the men, shouting at the top of his lungs, "Do not fight the serpent, destroy the altar, its power lies there." Though terrified, the men were loyal. They didn't know how to stop the serpent, but they trusted the boy. So when he cried out to them, they moved. They scrambled for their axes and knives, hacking and slashing at the serpent's altar. Vines and moss flew as the serpent screamed in rage. The ground cracked and fire erupted, tendrils of flame lashing out like whips. The ox and eagle fought desperately to hold it back, but the serpent was too strong. It broke free and struck down two men with a single blow of its tail. The boy cried out in grief, but kept pounding his gong, his voice now filled with both fear and fury. Then it happened. The serpent lunged, jaws wide enough to swallow him whole, and then just as its fangs closed in, the spirit of Chongmeng appeared behind him, tall and radiant, holding a spear that blazed with celestial fire. He placed himself between his grandson and the beast. "You will not take him," Chongmeng's spirit roared, and with that, the greatest battle of all time began. The spirit of Chongmeng was a warrior of legend, but the ntej serpent was older, hungrier, stronger. Even with the help of the wax spirits, the boy feared they would lose. Yet somehow Chongmeng's spirit managed to hold the serpent at bay, giving the men time to do the impossible. They hacked and slashed at the altar, weakening the serpent and fueling the boy's own power. With renewed determination, he summoned all the strength he could muster and drove his gong deep into the earth. Boom! The sound resonated with the vibrations of the mountain itself. The wax ox grew to the size of a hill. The wax eagle became a blazing sun in the sky, and for a moment, as the serpents recoiled, momentarily stunned, they had the upper hand. The men pressed their attack on the weakened beast, axes and knives flashed, tearing into the serpent's flanks. Blood mixed with venom sprayed into the air, sizzling as it hit the ground. But even so, the serpent was far from finished. It lashed out, smashing the ox and knocking the eagle from the sky. The men screamed and scattered. Only the boy stood his ground, calling upon his ancestors, pouring every ounce of his being into his gong. Again and again he struck, refusing to yield, and in the deepening twilight, as the last embers of the sunset faded away, the serpent faltered, it swayed, its head crashing to the ground. With a final Herculean effort, the men surged forward and struck the killing blow. The serpent let out a roar that shook the heavens, then went still. Silence fell over the clearing, heavy and profound. The boy lowered his arms, his chest heaving. Around him, the men stood frozen, staring at the fallen serpent. Then, as if waking from a dream, they rushed forward, hacking at the carcass, tearing it limb from limb. They cut the serpent's heart out and cast it on the fire, watching it burn with grim satisfaction. As the flames rose higher, carrying the scent of victory on their tongues, the boy knew his ordeal was not over. Now they had to rebuild their lives and their village. But for now, he allowed himself a rare smile. They had won. For now, the world was safe. And he, the unassuming boy, had played his part in the battle of generations.